Hello guys, this is Sandeep Gowda. In this video presentation, we will be discussing on TestRail integration with API using automation. So as part of this video, we will be covering how to execute or change the status of a test case to either pass or fail, how to get the list of test cases based on a suit ID or test case ID or user ID. So this is the very first session on TestRail integration with API. Hence, I'm covering only these 2 points, and we are mainly focusing on how to actually establish the API connection in TestRail. So moving on, this is my project TestRail integration, which I have developed using a Maven based project. So this is my POM, which includes couple of dependencies like Selenium, TestNG, WebDriver Manager, and JSON Simple. Using these four dependencies, for now, I was able to achieve the TestRail integration, or can we call as a connection to TestRail via API and execute the test cases. So this is my project structure, wherein I have a couple of classes here. This is TestRail automation.java, which is the actual test case and executable class. And I have a couple of utilities called API client, which has a lot of prerequisite methods to establish the API connection, like the send, post, get request, get authorization, and a constructor which is setting up the base URL ready for me, and a couple of other methods. And this is my API exception, which is a customized class to throw my exceptions. And this is a test trail manager, which has the actual method implementations to execute the test case status, to get the list of test cases, to get the result, to get the test cases by suit, to get the test cases by ID, which is test case ID, to get the test cases by user, which is the creator. Okay. Moving on to the actual test case, TestRail automation.java. So this is how my class looks, and this is the before method where I'm setting up the API client connection by giving the TestRail's engine URL along with the username and password, so that this object will be ready with the details. And when this class API client is called, it is indirectly calling this constructor and setting up the base URL ready for us. Moving on to the actual test case, let's move on to the first test case, like updating the test case status, which is accepting an input of test case ID to the method add result for test case. When this method is executed, this method will be called, and we are sending the inputs for the API client test case ID, the status either pass or fail, whatever we choose, and the error message in case of any exception. So if you notice, I have created two strings here, which is test case pass status and test case fail status with some integer values, which will be given as an input to the TestRail API. So once this method is called, it is going to call the send request by forming the API endpoint URL here, and we are sending the URI here. So this method will be called and executing the test case status here. Before that, let me show my actual test trail suite. So this is my professional ads test suite as for my project, which has a run ID of 147572, which will be also given as an input to my test case. So if you notice here, there are four test cases for this suite, out of which one is failed, whose test case ID is 41206210, which I'm sending as input here, 41206210. So for that particular test case, I'm trying to change the test case status to passed, because currently it is failed. Now I'm trying to change this test case status to pass via API. So I'm going to run this test case. So this is the API endpoint URL which we formed for changing the status. So for every methodology, for every method in test case, we need to form a couple of API endpoint URLs for which changing the status of test case is follows this syntax: add result for test case, the run id, test run id, which is nothing but this 147572, and then we need to append the test case id. So this is the actual endpoint URL which is formed for our test case. So now you see, if you see, we were able to run this test case, and we have one zero failures and one runs. So that means our test case has been executed perfectly, and the expectation is the test case status has to be changed to pass from fail. Let me refresh this page. So if you notice, we were able to achieve the expectation of being marking the status of the test case as passed from fail. So this is one method, and there are a couple of more methods like getting the test case by id. We just need to pass the test case id, so it will print us the, will get us all the test case details by id. And we have test cases, getting all the test cases from a suite. So we just need to pass the project id along with the suite id, then we will be able to getting all the test cases which are created or linked under that profession suite, getting all the test cases from user. So this will retrieve all the test cases created by a particular user, just that we need to pass the user id of that person. In the here, in this case, my user id is 29, so I'm passing this number. So this will return all the test cases which are created by me under this suit. Yeah, well, that's pretty much about this session of getting the test cases by various methods, and also being able to update the test case status to either pass or fail via API. So there is more coming. This is the very first as this is the very first session. So I covered on how to establish the API connection, and then how to get the test cases and also update the test case status.